Chuck Marino. And we now go to our first question, and our debate will open up with Clark Durant. Ron Edwards, you have the first question.
Well, name some well-known individuals that have influenced your philosophy of government.
Clark Durant, you'll have 30 seconds on this question.
George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus, Ronald Reagan, and my father.
Thank you, Clark Durant. Gary Glenn, same question, 30 seconds.
We may have some of the same heroes, Clark.
Did you know my father?
Did you know mine?
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
Well, certainly my dad would be one of them, certainly George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan. I like to say I was raised on Reagan. I was about 20 years old when he was elected, and it's been hard to please ever since. Frederick Bastiat, Hugh Hazlitt, some of the economists that have influenced my economic thinking in terms of public policy. And a lot of reading over the years about the history of this country and a deep and passionate love for country and for our flag and for our constitutional system of government.
Thank you, Gary Glenn. Randy Hekman, same question, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so many people that have influenced. Certainly my own dad did. He's long gone. He was a Navy vet. James Madison said some great things. Washington, certainly. John Adams, you can't forget him. He says our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Thomas Jefferson, just the huge things that he did with the Declaration. Those would be some of the top of my list. George Washington, if I didn't say him, he's a good man, good guy.
Thank you, Randy Hekman. Chuck Marino, same 30-second question.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Jesus Christ influenced my life, and then George Washington. Of course, many of my kids think I knew him personally. But the man that brought me to my political beliefs was Ronald Reagan. I read and I understand Ronald Reagan, and I've understood his background and his passion for this country. The last is my father. My father gave me my business understanding since the age of 11. I worked for my dad, and he gave me my understanding of what it is to be a capitalist.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. Finally, Scotty Boman, same question. Individuals who have influenced your philosophy of government, 30 seconds.
I'd say Jesus Christ influenced heavily my view on nonviolence and the non-initiation of force. I'd say Thomas Paine is one of my favorite founding fathers as far as some of the literature he's written. Also Thomas Jefferson. In modern times we have Ayn Rand and Ron Paul.
Thank you, Scotty Boman. We'll go on to the next question right now. This one has to do with foreign policy. Gary Glenn, will be starting with you. As a sovereign nation, why are we agreeing to international treaties or UN dictates that take away our freedoms and rights included in our Constitution, and the follow-up within that, and take it how you will from there? And does our Constitution supersede these? Your thoughts. This will be a 1.5-minute response.
Well, to the extent that we are agreeing to anything proposed by the United Nations or The Hague or any other international body in an attempt to subvert the Constitution of the United States, you can certainly count on my vote as a United States Senator to stand against that. Whether it's the law of the Sea Treaty or whether it's Agenda 21 or any other attempt by an international body to impose a collectivist socialist type mentality on the people of this country by any means whatsoever. One of the duties of a United States Senator, number one, when you take that oath of office, is to uphold the Constitution of the United States. By the way, members of the United States Supreme Court take that exact same oath. And I think they lead us down the path of collectivism when they cite as precedent for decisions interpreting the Constitution of the United States, decisions made by foreign courts. I think that needs to stop. And I think we need to insist that all nominees for the United States Supreme Court have a record of refusing to do anything but cite American courts in their decisions about what the Constitution of the United States means. I said on my website, when I first put it up, garyglenn.us, that one of the things that I think we should do as a matter of foreign policy and to save some money while we're at it, which we very much need to do with a $16 trillion debt, is get out of and quit funding the United Nations and funding the mechanism by which they try to impose it.
That is time. Thank you, Gary Glenn. Next question, Randy Hekman. Again, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes rather, on the agreeing to international treaties of the UN and others, and our constitutional thoughts.
You got a half minute for the total?
No, you get 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
90 seconds total.
All right, thank you. Well, again, Gary said it very well, I think. You know, we are a nation that has been formed over 200 years ago. And I am so proud of what those men and women did. Largely men, but some women as well contributed to what happened back there. This was an experiment. I mean, this was the first time in the history of the world where a group of people got together and there was a humility about them. They said, do you think we could do this? And they said, this is what it's going to take to make this thing work. To make it work, we're going to have individuals to be shareholders in this thing we call America. And not just receiving goods from our country and the pleasures and the privileges of citizenship, but being shareholders in this experiment. And they declared certain things in our Declaration of Independence. Clark mentioned the first sentence of those, that we're entitled by God to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The next sentence, to secure these God-given rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's just incredible. Those sentences are profound. And they said, could we do this? Someone said, is this a rising sun or a setting sun? Well, it's been a rising sun. It's been an incredible experiment. And we are such beneficiaries of it today. And now we have this sense that, no, it's not good enough. We've got to behave like the countries across the oceans. Well, they're all losing their credit ratings because they're going in a direction that our president and our leadership wants to take us. We can't do that. So we need to fight. We need to fight any attempt to give the American sovereignty away to some international body. Oppose it totally.
That is time. Thank you, Randy Hekman. Chuck Marino, same question. 1 minute and 30 seconds for your response.
As far as treaties are concerned, you have to have a group of people that can negotiate in your behalf. When the United States is led by a president that goes around the country apologizing for our successes, there is no way he can negotiate a successful contract for this country. Secondly, the United Nations. The United Nations, my dad used to tell me to question all things. What is behind the United Nations' grab for power? It's money. They want to influence a cash stream for themselves. So they inject things like global warming, which I'm here to tell you global warming is the biggest hoax. I read technical papers for a living. I read international papers. I wrote international electrical standards for the world. And I'm here to tell you, it's like most of us have a 1,500 square foot house. It's like taking an ant, putting an ant in your house, and if he defecates and he breathes, and your heat goes up and you blame it on the ant and not your furnace. It's ridiculous. As far as the UN is concerned, they're looking for ways to have a revenue stream and control over our life, and we should all be cautious of it.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. Scotty Boman, same question. Why do you agree to international treaties that take away freedom and rights, and your thoughts on the Constitution in regards? 90 seconds.
Okay, well, Article 6, the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, includes the Constitution itself and treaties as the supreme law of the land. However, what's clear here is the treaties do not supersede the U.S. Constitution ever. Now, they can supersede statutory law and state law. However, I would oppose any treaty and would refuse to advise in favor of it if it was at all crafted to remove any rights from the people within any of the states, as well as violating any of the constitutional rights, which really it could not supersede anyway. Furthermore, I will add that I am also opposed to any type of taxpayer funding of the UN or any participation by the United States in the UN, especially any participation that amounts to recognizing it as somehow being some sort of government, which it is not.
Thank you, Scotty Boman. And Clark Durant, finally, same question, 90 seconds.
As a United States Senator, not only will I not vote for any treaty that in any way would undermine our Constitution, I will actively work against it publicly across the country, as Ronald Reagan did so many different times, to go out and get the people to rise up against these things. on the issue of this whole issue of sovereignty. Our courts can only use and should only use American law for American courts. We have a unique history that is unique in the world, and we should not undermine that by drawing on foreign lands to rule our people. But second, I would withdraw us from the United Nations, not just to withdraw it and say we're not going to spend taxpayer dollars on this very aggressive socialist agenda, but I would take the effort to reestablish a new united body of people across the world who seek freedom and want to be a part of a universal body to emulate what we have established, the last best hope of mankind on earth, and how we can plant those seeds with ideas and let them come to our shores. Gather, not in New York, let's do Philadelphia, and begin this model, this new model of freedom, and teach people what we have learned over these last 260 years. Freedom works, and American law in American courts.
Thank you, Clark Durant. Rob Williams, you have, or Ron Edwards, rather, forgive me, you have the next question.
Okay. Well, this next question deals with constitutional issues. And we're going to be starting with Randy Hekman. While executive orders have been used by all presidents, why are they allowed to be used to pass laws, since only Congress has the power to pass laws? And to follow up, what would you do to stop this abuse of power? You have 1 minute to answer that question.
All right, again, the issue of executive orders is just going overboard with our current president. He says, look, get the Congress out of the way. I'm in charge here, and I'm going to do what I want to do. So there's been executive appointments. We have the czars. People have asked me, what do you think about the czars? They say czars, as I know, belong in Russia, not in America. And he's done other appointments that he's made, that he has gone around the congressional, as far as being able to get confirmations from Senate and so on of different positions, particularly the recess appointments that he just did, totally without regard for the balance of power that we need. So it is wrong for us to lose that balance. We need all three branches of government to be keeping each other in check. It's not happening. What can the Congress do? What can the Senate, as part of that Congress, do? Well, it strikes me that we need to bring these people, whether they're the judicial branch or the executive branch, need to be brought before congressional subcommittees to answer for why they're breaking the Constitution. The Constitution, we need to be a rule of law people, not a rule of man.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hekman. The same question for you, Chuck Marino. While executive orders have been used by all presidents, why are they allowed to be used to pass laws, since only Congress has the power to pass laws? And to follow up, what would you do to stop this abuse of power? And you do have 1 minute.
I think you got to examine the difference between other governments and the governments of the United States. We're a government by the people. We have boundaries, and those boundaries are based in people understanding the Constitution and putting self-imposements on their own self, not to go outside the parameters that our forefathers set. In today's society, we have a group of people who are socialists that believe that they can walk outside the parameter with no restraint. It's time that we use the Constitution to call them back. One of the things we need to do is to call them in and to find out why they think it's all right to use and abuse our laws like they're abusing. Up until this point, I think what's happened is this president has decided he's above the law, and he believes that he can do what he wants to do and test the system to the point. And I think a number of us don't have the courage to stand up and say to him, no, sir, you can't. Our Congress has to have courage. And if you elect me, I will be the first one to call him in to a Senate inquiry.
Thank you very much. And Scotty Boman, this question is being addressed to you. While executive orders have been used by all presidents, why are they allowed to use to pass laws, since only Congress has the power to pass laws? And to follow up, what would you do to stop this abuse of power? And you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize what the appropriate use of an executive order actually is, which is to run the executive branch of the government. That rather than Congress micromanaging how a president runs the executive branch, if the president has some leeway internally as to the policies of that organization, the executive branch. Unfortunately, yes, the executive orders have been abused in the sense of violating the separation of powers. It's unconstitutional. We have examples where Franklin Delano Roosevelt enabled the wanton theft of gold by Federal Reserve banks from the American people, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. We have had cases where unprecedented powers being granted to FEMA, almost as if it could function as a shadow government that would have powers exceeding those of our own government. I would oppose, my solution is to pass legislation that contradicts the executive orders and thereby makes them nullified, since there'd be standing for legislation passed by a legislator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boman. And Clark Durant, the same question applies to you, and you do have 1 minute to answer. While executive orders have been used by all presidents, why are they allowed to be used to pass laws, since only Congress has the power to pass laws? And what would you do to stop this abuse of power?
First, Mr. Boman is correct. There is a legitimate role for the executive to issue executive orders around his or her department as President of the United States. But if you look over the history of these abuses, everything from Harry Truman seizing the steel mills, Bill Clinton conducting war in Yugoslavia under an executive order, President Obama using an executive order involving Libya, mortgage, veterans, a whole series of things. And I think the only way you stop this is there are only 3 ways to stop it. One, you can try to affect the appropriations process so that there's no money to fund any of the things that are done. Second, you can begin to pass a law, but a law doesn't become a law until the president signs it. But then you have to educate the people. The people have to rise up. This is not something that you can sort of elect a senator or a member of Congress and then go back to your daily life and work. You have to be a part of this process. The people have to rise up once they know the threat to their liberty when the president oversteps his bounds, as this one has.
Thank you very much, Mr. Durant. Up next, Gary Glenn. While executive orders have been used by all presidents, why are they allowed to be used to pass laws, since only Congress has the power to pass laws? And what would you, sir, do to stop this abuse of power? You have 1 minute.
The answer to that question is because the legislative branch has not utilized the checks and balances that the Constitution of the United States provides to hold the executive branch in check. Now, we've seen examples of this with this new Rural Sustainable Development Agency put together by executive order, which is going to try to impose Agenda 21 regulations, violations of private property rights, transfer of wealth, all from the Obama administration, a myriad of orders signed regarding FEMA's authority in a declared emergency to relocate families, seize property, all means of transportation, all wealth. You know, both Jefferson and Lincoln said that it is the constitutional duty of each branch of government to render independent judgment as to whether or not something violates the Constitution. And if in the independent judgment of the legislative branch, the executive branch has violated the Constitution, then one of the checks and balances the Constitution provides is articles of impeachment. And to save our country from going over the brink of socialism, we should exercise those checks and balances.
Thank you very much. And next is Randy Hekman. And while executive orders have been used by all presidents...
We've already got everybody on.
I'm sorry.
Again?
Next question.
Yep, time for next question.
Yes, indeed.
With that in mind, let's start with Chuck Marino in this segment, and that is, what would be, and we all know that some people can get in the way and circumstances can, but if you could wave a magic wand, what would be the first bill that you would introduce in the Senate if elected? Chuck Marino, that is 1 minute.
I think the first bill, it's so hard to pick which exact bill I would pass. I think the first thing I would do is look for a bill for, at least to try to go after balance of the budget. We have to have a balanced budget amendment. And I would do whatever I could do to get consensus between all of the people that have the same kind of viewpoint I have and try to get a balanced budget amendment. But more than that, I think we need to sunset all of our all of our regulations. I think all the regulations that we have today, we have to put a means test together, and the means test has to be where we judge them from how they affect jobs and how they affect our workers, and how they affect profits. And if they have a negative effect in each one of those, I think we have to consider them in a different light. We have to put together win-win situations for both of our economy and our businessmen, and also for our government. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. Scotty Boman, same question. Please let us know if Scotty's mic isn't working when we have to pass it around. Can everybody hear Scotty Boman this time?
Hello.
His mic is on in the back, guys? Are you getting signal? We want to make sure the radio broadcasts.
Hello.
Can you give us a yes or no on that?
No.
No? Let's pass over we'll pass over the handheld then, and so that way we can get Scotty. We want to make sure Scotty's heard on the broadcast as well. Sorry about that. Hope you'll help us through the technical difficulties. Just hold it up and go ahead, Scotty.
Okay. I would first repeal, as I've said, the National Defense the detainee provisions, especially Section 1031 of the National Defense Appropriations Act of fiscal year 2012. I would repeal that part. You wouldn't want to repeal the whole thing, or the troops wouldn't get paid. The other thing I'd like to do is repeal the Federal Reserve Act, specifically dissolve the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, and repeal all legal tender laws.
Thank you, Scotty Boman. Clark Durant, same question. And what would be the first bill if you had the selection that you would introduce into the Senate?
Well, I would call it the Omnibus Freedom Bill, and I would repeal Obamacare. I would repeal Dodd-Frank. I would repeal the IRS code in its entirety and replace it with, if God can do it with 10%, then so can the federal government. And I would say that the federal government, like every family and every business, can't spend beyond its means. And it would be the Omnibus Freedom Bill for everybody.
Gary Glenn, same question. 1 minute.
1 minute. I think the dominant issue facing Michigan in the 2012 election is the fact that we as a state in the last 10 years have lost 800,000 private sector jobs. So I could pick from any one of the following as a way of making Michigan and America more competitive. First, the passage of a national right-to-work law so that every American is free to choose. Second, a bill to allow our technology and our engineers to drill, baby, drill with our trillion barrels of oil, and help use the proceeds of the sale of that oil to help pay off our national debt. And finally, to dramatically reduce, if not eliminate, the federal inheritance tax, capital gains tax, personal income tax, corporate income tax, replace it what I think would be the ideal, because it would allow us to close down the most hated and feared agency of the federal government, the IRS, thefairtax.com.
Thank you, Gary Glenn. Next question, Ron Edwards. You have the floor on that.
But I didn't answer that question.
You did not answer that question.
No,
Sorry
sir.
about that. No, you didn't. That was my mistake. My apologies, Randy Hekman. Go ahead, please.
Why don't you ask it again, please?
We'll do it. What was the first bill, if you get the opportunity and of whatever you decide, what would be the first bill that you'd like to introduce in the Senate?
All right. Again, we can talk about drilling, we can talk about right to work, and all those things are good, but the house that is on fire today is the debt that grows at $76,000 every tick of the clock, every second. We've got to cut that back. I mean, repealing Obamacare has to be near the top of our agenda. That is a big chunk of change and is taking over an increasing part of our economy. But beyond that, the one thing that does not fit our federal government is our welfare state. It's killing our European sisters and brothers across the ocean. It's killing us. It is the fastest growing budget item in the last 20 years is means-tested welfare. We're hurting the very people we say we claim we care for. We need to return this back to nonprofits and charities. Look on my Facebook, you'll see a great picture or a video that recently was put up by our friend in Washington, D.C., who's head of CURE. And she says the very same thing. Get government out of welfare. help us create jobs.
Thank you, Randy Hekman. As you're listening online, I want to remind you this is the Michigan for Conservative Senate Republican debate. We appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon. Ron Edwards, you have the next question.
Yes, indeed. And it deals with foreign policy. I'm going to start with Chuck Marino.
No, Scotty Boman.
No, Scotty Boman. Okay.
Gives us a good chance to test
Somebody.
out a new mic.
Anyway, we're going to start with Scotty Boman, and we're dealing with foreign policy. Several states have enacted laws to require proof of citizenship, a birth certificate, naturalization papers, or whatever, to register to vote. Now, our federal government has sued these states to stop the state's laws from being applied. What is your opinion on these issues? And you have 1.5 minutes to answer.
I don't need 1.5 minutes to simply say that if you're going to help choose leaders in this country, you better be a U.S. citizen. Next.
I guess he's done. Clark Durant, same question, please.
If states wanted to decide that a picture ID is necessary in order to register to vote, they should be entitled to do so. You need a picture to climb on a plane, you need a picture to drive a car, you need a picture sometimes to cash a check. Voting is the most important of all of those, and if it's a way of securing the right to vote, then it should be done. But the most important thing truly is to see that this is a country that does not have this illegal immigration problem. I was fortunate to have a call from a friend yesterday who was at a ceremony where 250 new American citizens were brought to our shores and signed up, and they had their oath of office. But the coolest thing, the judge went to the house of a 111-year-old Iranian woman who, before she died, wanted to become an American citizen. Let's make this the best place in the world to be an American citizen.
Up next, Gary Glenn, same question, please.
Well, I'm kind of like Scotty. It takes all of about 10 seconds to say that states should be able to require a photo ID and proof of citizenship to vote in a United States election. But we also need to build a fence on our southern border. We need to supplement it with technology. We need to man it with troops and border patrol. We need to support rather than imprison border patrol agents who are loyal and do their duty to protect the borders of this country. We need to remove the economic incentive for people to come here illegally in terms of welfare payments or tuition breaks. And this is one of the examples in which, an outrageous example, the federal government does so many things it should not be doing, period. And I think we will not save our country by tinkering around the edges. We need to return to Article 1, Section 8, enumerated powers given to the federal government. But to engage in so many aspects of our lives and then fail in the government's duty to secure our borders such that a farmer or rancher in southern Arizona no longer feels secure in his life and property and his family on the soil of the United States is infuriating. I was lectured by a lady of Mexican birth earlier in this campaign who told me that her family stood in line for a year to come here legally, and she insisted that as a United States Senator, I make sure everybody had to come in legally as she did.
Thank you, Gary Glenn. Up next, Randy Hekman, same question, and you have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. Again, the basic answer to the basic question is straightforward. Of course, you need to be a citizen to be able to vote in this country. That's a no-brainer. But since we have extra time and we're talking about immigration, let's just go on the other side. How many of you are sons or grandsons or great-grandsons of someone from another country?
We all are.
We all are. Isn't that amazing? I, too, a grandson of someone that came from the Netherlands. They came legally. So again, we as conservatives, we love people, but we want people to come here legally. But the only way to make sure that that happens...
We all are.
That's right. To make sure that happens...
The Chippewas.
There you go. That's right. There you go. There you go.
Don't forget the Vikings.
The Vikings, right. I'm a little Norwegian
Either
too.
the north or the west or the south or something, they were all immigrants to this area as well.
Okay. But we got to make sure that we secure the borders so that we can figure out who comes here. But I think it's wonderful that people want to come here. We want to encourage legal immigration because statistically, it's those that have the chutzpah to come to this country that create jobs. But they got to do it legally, and we need, it hasn't been said yet, to make English the official language of our country. And we need people to learn our system and love our system. We're not a salad bowl. We are a melting pot. And I love this melting. I love all the diversity, but coming together around these ideals that have made America so great. It's wonderful. We need more of that.
Thank you very much. And Chuck Marino, same question, and you also have a minute and a half. Thank you.
Our framers wanted to make sure when they put the Constitution together that they gave individual rights to us under the 9th Amendment. They made sure that they told everybody under that amendment that nobody could abridge our rights. And then under the 10th Amendment, they told all the states what rights they had. It's kind of ironic that the whole system has been turned upside down, but it's not unusual for socialism. Because right now we have a federal government that thinks they own all the rights and they dictate to our country. As far as immigration is concerned, I am a son of grandparents who came to this country in the 1920s. So immigration has always been our best resource. But unfortunately, we have people that break our laws. But our government encourages them to break our laws. And you've got to ask yourself the question, why? We have the best technology in the world. We have the best law enforcement in the world. Why can't we enforce the rules that are already on the books today? Well, I maintain this government doesn't want to enforce. And they give us 11 million people in this country illegally. And that's wrong.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. We're gonna
Red flag.
red flag. Gary Glenn calls a red flag. He gets a 30-second response. And Gary Glenn, go ahead, please.
This is one of those issues on which you can choose to believe that our government, a president who went to Columbia and Harvard Law School, is simply incompetent and ignorant, or that you can believe he knows exactly what he's doing and he's doing it on purpose. Making tens of millions of more Americans dependent on the government, like food stamps, ever-expanding government, supplemented by a flow of illegal immigration, all in the hopes of locking in a permanent voting bloc for the party that hands out all the government goodies. We've got to reverse that trend and stop them, including using the checks and balances allowed the legislative by the Constitution of the United States.
Just to explain, red flags are thrown, that each candidate gets twice to put down a red flag. That gives them a time at any time during the event from start to end to have an extra 30-second response either to another candidate or something they'd like to add to the discussion. And so Gary Glenn has used one. None of our other candidates have used any of their 2 red flags as of yet. We're going to switch over to our lightning round segment for a few minutes and then go back to in-depth questions. Again, lightning round is where we typically ask for either yes or no or brief answers to these questions. We'll go over. I'll take about, take the first 3, Ron Edwards will take the second 3, and we'll just kind of pop back and forth a little bit. It's Clark Durant's turn to go first. Clark Durant, quick response to, should Michigan be a right-to-work state?
Yes.
Fair enough, Gary Glenn.
Yes, and I'm a founding member of the group that's pushing it, and in the 80s, I led the campaign to pass a right-to-work law in Idaho.
Randy Hekman.
I could just say yes.
Chuck Marino.
Yes, but I'd like to also say, here's my red flag.
Oh.
He gets a full 30 seconds now. Chuck Marino calls red flag.
Gary's right. We should have the right to work state. But it's a slippery slope when we decide as people of the federal government to interject ourselves into state issues. It's very important for us to understand that boundary I talked about before. President Obama has already injected himself into this debate with not allowing Boeing to open a plant in South Carolina and then requiring all businesses to post signs that said, you're entitled to have a union.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. Scotty Boman, final same question. Should Michigan be a right-to-work state?
No, it violates the right of people to enter into a contract.
Very true.
Let's go on to our
And I'll throw my second red flag.
second red. Stand by. I'll ask the audience to be careful with throwing out stuff, not because we're trying to swell you, it's because we don't have a microphone and our listening audience online was not able to hear you. Gary Glenn did throw his second red flag. Gary Glenn, you have 30 seconds.
As I said, I led the campaign to pass a right-to-work law in Idaho in the 1980s. I consider myself to have considerable expertise and experience on that issue. There are many things that the Constitution provides as universal guarantees. Our right to keep and bear arms. An example of one they should provide but don't is our right to life. I don't think that ought to be a states' rights issue. And I believe that the right to have a job and feed your family without being forced to give money to a left-wing labor organization is a fundamental right that ought to be guaranteed in every state in this country.
We have another red flag.
Scotty has thrown a red flag. Scotty Boman, go ahead.
I'll further clarify. The right to make a business decision with someone else and enter into a contract on the terms of that agreement, be it exclusive or inclusive, is a personal business decision. You have a right to a lot of things. To say you have a right to a job and a right to dinner on your table is to claim you have a right to something that isn't yours. A right to the money that someone else would spend on employees and a right to the food that a farmer grows. You do not have a right to take from others. That is not a right, it is a commodity.
And then Scotty Boman, any other red flags? We've drawn quite a few on this. Nope, no red flags on this one. Let's throw the next one out there. 2 questions that tie in with taxes. First one, should the IRS be abolished and replaced by the fair tax? Gary Glenn, you're first.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Randy Hekman said
Yes.
yes. Chuck Marino?
Yes.
Scotty
Abolished and replaced with nothing.
Fair enough. Clark Durant, you're the final one now.
I think it should be abolished and replaced, but I'm for the flat tax because if you look at the penalty on seniors and others that some economists have pointed out with the fair tax, we need to be very careful before we go down that road.
But you can't eliminate the IRS.
You're gonna throw-
with
you're gonna
flat-
throw-
with a
you're gonna
flat
throw-
tax.
you're gonna-
Hang on, guys. Gary, you're all red flags.
You're out of flags, baby.
Senators are to play by the rules.
Although it would be entertaining to the audience to have a Lincoln Douglas, we do need to keep it going. So.
But this is a marketplace.
Does anyone have any more red flags for purchase? The rest we can have an auction today.
He's got a red tie.
Give me 20 bucks.
Do I hear 25?
Only in gold.
Who says debates aren't fun? Let's look at the last one, and then we're going to go to Ron Edwards for some lightning round questions. Tied in with taxes, do you support the idea of a flat tax? We start out with Randy Hekman and go down the line. Randy Hekman.
Yes.
Yes? Chuck Marino.
Yes, with some reservations and some guarantees in it.
Scotty Boman.
Oh, I'm sorry, is there another question?
Yep, do you support the flat tax as a possibility?
As a possibility.
Okay, fair enough. And Clark Durant?
Yes.
And then Gary Glenn.
Yes, even though it will not allow us to shut down the IRS.
Did we get a flag thrown on that one?
I say no.
I thought I saw the wrist move, Clark Durant. Sorry about that.
It's a deflection.
There you go. We go to Ron Edwards. Ron, 3 questions in our lightning round as well. We're starting off with Chuck Marino.
All right, Chuck, we are now well over $15 trillion in debt, and the next week Congress will be discussing raising the debt level another $1.5 trillion. Would you ever vote to increase the debt of the federal government?
No.
I'm sorry, Scotty?
Scotty Bowman.
No.
Clark Durant?
No.
Gary Glenn?
No.
Randy Hekman?
No.
And that was easy. And our next question. Should life begin at inception? At conception? Scotty Bowman.
Scotty Bowman.
It does.
Both.
Gary Glenn?
Both?
Conception.
A higher authority answered that question a long time ago. Yes.
Randy Hekman?
I wrote a book on the subject.
And Chuck Marino.
Yes.
And this next question, should being born in this country make you a citizen of this country?
And we'll start
with Clark Durant.
Say the question again.
Should being born in this country make you a citizen of this country?
Well, the 14th Amendment, unless we want to repeal that, it says that that is true. And I think George Washington, if you go back and read his farewell address, says that we need to be prudent and careful before changing the framework of our Constitution.
And Gary Glenn?
Only if your parents are legal citizens of this country.
Randy Hekman?
I mean, are we going to get an explanation for a yes or no? Because if we are, I just would take it. Okay? I just to clarify this, if this were my courtroom, I'd have my gavel out. Right? Because there needs to be an explanation here.
Right, exactly.
It strikes me, I mean, it is in the 14th Amendment, but for a person to come over the border and give birth and make that child a citizen, that goes against what the 14th Amendment means.
Exactly.
I think we need legislation to clarify that.
We will ask if you want to do an explanation during the lightning round of a heavier one, please throw your flag at 10 cents.
All right.
And Chuck Marino?
Yes to what Randy said.
Scotty, please.
And yes, but if their parents are here illegally, they must go back home and they can return when they become an adult.
Legal when they become legal.
And let's do one more question in the lightning round and we'll move on. And that would be, would you join the Tea Party caucus in the U.S. Senate? We start with Gary Glenn.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Didn't even have to give you names on those. We just went through and took care of it. Now we're going to go back to our more detailed questions and so forth. Ron, why don't you take the first question for the group? And we'll start with Randy Hekman will receive the first question.
And we're going to be in personal philosophy. What have you done in the past to demonstrate that if you win the U.S. Senate seat, you will have the courage to stand up to the parties in the Senate, even if it means standing alone? And you do have 1.5 minutes to answer that question.
All right. Again, you should talk on things like this. You need to talk to people around me who have seen me at work for the last umpteen years since being in the Navy. But maybe one of the strongest things was, I showed you this book. I ended up writing this book in 1982 because of a case where a 13-year-old was pregnant, wanted me to order an abortion, and I'm a juvenile court judge. And as I looked at the law from the Supreme Court seemed to imply strongly, wasn't clear, but seemed to imply strongly that I had to ignore the rights of this unborn baby. Well, here I am, a juvenile court judge, and my job is to protect children from abuse and neglect. That's part of what I'm supposed to do. And here I'm supposed to be schizophrenic and order the killing of this baby, this innocent unborn child. And I took a very strong decision, and I said, look, again, all the evidence suggested she should not have the abortion, just looking at overall picture. But I said, even if the evidence went the other way, apart from saving the life of the mother, which was not the issue, I wouldn't do it. It was a criminal act. And I put my job on the line. We had, how many, 8 kids at that time? 9 kids? I don't even know how many kids we had. I needed to support my family. But I put the job on the line. The National Organization for Women filed a complaint. By the way, after my decision, this young lady had an ultrasound. I said, what's the big thing about abortion? And she saw this little boy sucking his thumb in her womb. She changed her mind. She wrote me a letter thanking me. So I put my job on the line. National Organization for Women, Grand Rapids Press, all said some pretty nasty things about me. I don't care. I look in the mirror every day and I report to God, and He's the one that I have to live for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hekman. Chuck Marino, same question, please.
All my life I've had to stand up against people and groups that have decided to walk outside morality and limit my rights. When I was just an 18-year-old boy, I was at a basketball game at Bloomfield Hills, and a guy was being picked on by 4 or 5 different people. And I interjected myself in the middle of the circle and asked them what was going on. They told me they were going to kick his butt. I told them, well, they're going to have to do it to me. Well, both of us got our butts kicked. I joined the Marine Corps and I learned duty to God, country, and family. And they taught me something else. They taught me to always respect life and to understand that it was my job to stand up for the less fortunate. Throughout my history, I've had to do that. Even when I opened my own businesses, the playing field was always unlevel. Even entering this race, and even as I try to go out and speak to a lot of people, there are people that stand in the way of my speech. And I still fight them. At the DeWitt, I stood up and fought a guy that decided that 3 weeks previous, it wasn't good enough for me to speak. He told me he couldn't get me in the debate, and then stood before these gentlemen and told them it was my fault. Well, I went right to the top front of that convention and said, I want a minute to speak. And I'm telling you right now, you have to muster the courage, because this country is in dire straits, and you got to elect people who are going to stand up. But it's not good enough to elect me. You have to stand up too.
Thank you very much, Scotty. Boman, same question.
I think basically anyone who's really heard me at any of these forums knows I have absolutely no problem standing alone and not agreeing with everyone else around me. And I might have, by the way, the right to work thing was one example. And I just want to add to that, because a lot of people might think I'm coming from one direction, and I'm really not. I'm coming from another one. The federal Constitution prohibits intervention in intrastate commerce, only allows regulation of interstate commerce to help trade be better. And I do support repealing the Wagner Act and all the laws that force unionization on businesses, in which case the whole discussion of right to work states would not even arise. Another thing though, I have been involved in the Libertarian Party before now, and that's definitely standing alone, being part of a very small political party relative to the Republicans and the Democrats. And I've been active doing that, and so that's been standing alone pretty much across the board on the issues, and I've been an activist on a variety of issues that are not necessarily perceived as mainstream by the political class. So I don't think there's any doubt, anyone looking at my record, going to Boman12.org and then linking to various activities I've been involved in the past, well, it'll be clear that I have no problem standing alone on principle and disagreeing with everyone around me if necessary.
Thank you very much. Durant.
One of my great heroes in the movies is Jimmy Stewart. And if you've ever saw that movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I will be that kind of senator that will, if necessary, stand alone in the well of the Senate on behalf of the Constitution and freedom. And I don't have to just say it to you. When I headed up an agency for President Reagan, I had a Republican United States Senator tell one of my staff people, go back and tell Clark Durant to shut up and spend the money like everyone else. When President Ford was running in the Michigan primary in 1976, although he was a friend of my father's, Ronald Reagan had become my friend, and I stood up and organized a whole group of young people who met President Ford at the train in Niles, Michigan. And a Michigan congressman, a Republican, came up to me and said, how could you do this? Your father is a friend of the president's. And I said, because Ronald Reagan offers a vision of the future that our country needs. All my life has been an example, time and time again, of standing up to the establishment and to the status quo in order to do the right thing. My mama always used to say, if you have a tough job, give it to Clarky. And I'm ready to do it on your behalf, too.
Up next, Gary Glenn.
You want proof that I'm willing to stand up to the Republican Party establishment? I'm standing here with you, running for the United States Senate. When the establishment tells us that we already have a Republican nominee. Somebody who's so brazen as to put on his website that he will not come to one of your meetings if you hold a straw poll, because straw polls held by Tea Parties of Tea Party members don't really represent the Tea Party movement. That's on Pete Hoekstra's website, attributed directly to him. I want you to know my heart and my instincts so that you can have some sense of how I would judge things in the United States Senate, because things might come up that you and I, neither one of us, anticipate. The standard by which I will judge legislation is it constitutional? Will it be more likely that I will be able someday to hear, well done, good and faithful servant? Will my wife and children be able to be proud of the decisions that I make? I mentioned to you that in the 1980s, I led the campaign that successfully passed a right-to-work law in Idaho. For 12 years, I've been president of the American Family Association of Michigan, promoting Judeo-Christian values in this state, and was one of 2 co-authors of the Marriage Protection Amendment to our Constitution that got about 60% of the vote. You don't lead on controversial issues like that and take the slings and arrows from the left and the media if you don't have the guts to stand up to the establishment, and I didn't back down an inch. And I'll stand up to Mitch McConnell as quick as I will Harry Reid in the United States Senate.
Chuck Marino, you'll receive the next question first, and that is, what is your position on a state's rights to nullification under the 10th Amendment? Chuck Marino, you get 90 seconds.
I think I've already talked about my position on states' rights and what I believe. So I'll reiterate a couple things. First of all, when our framers put together the Constitution, it was very important for them to understand that our government was by the people, for the people. It came from the people up. That means the local government is the most important part of our government. It starts with the family, then our local government, and then our state government. And all things should be settled at the state first. Our federal government taking over our lives and taking over some of the rules and regulations and passing things that are state right issues are things we've got to stand up against. It continues to erode what our framers put in the Constitution under the 10th Amendment.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. Scotty Boman, same question. 10th Amendment, state right nullification, your thoughts?
The rights and powers not enumerated in the Constitution for the federal government are reserved for the states and the people. It's pretty straightforward. The states, the people in the state should be able to make their own decisions regarding laws that are already not covered under the enumerated powers. And it's unfortunate that we have federal courts that often neglect that fact. There are a couple things I was involved with. And the majority of the people in Michigan back these things. Michigan's Civil Rights Initiative and the medical marijuana law. 2 things that the federal government has completely ignored the 10th Amendment as if it wasn't even in the Constitution. Michigan Civil Rights Initiative simply banned discrimination based upon sex and race. But the federal courts decided that the 14th Amendment, which also pretty much says that, somehow says the opposite. One problem here is we have the federal courts trying to take jurisdiction over a state matter when it is already stated that this is not a federal matter. The states have a right to nullification because they cannot count on the federal government to be a fair player to referee a dispute on these matters. Second of all, we have the case of the medical marijuana laws. The federal government keeps insisting, well, it's illegal by federal law, and therefore federal trumps state. No, it does not. Only the federal Constitution is the only federal law that trumps state law. No other federal laws do that, and the federal Constitution gives us the 10th Amendment.
Thank you, Scotty Boman. Clark Durant, same question. You will receive 90 seconds as well.
It's a great question, but its success depends on it depends on the people of the states rising up to our state representatives and our governor and refusing to participate in things where the federal government has overstepped its bounds. This isn't just about restraining federal power, it's about states beginning to exercise and standing up and saying no. It's like Arizona saying, you're not protecting our borders, we will. And every state, from Obamacare, states and people have to stand up. This is not something that the federal government is willingly going to step back on. All of us have got to be willing to exercise the powers that our founders gave us in the 10th Amendment. And we're not doing it, and we must. And that's the role of nullification and the way it ought to work under our experiment in self-government.
Thank you, Clark Durant. Gary Glenn, same question. State right nullification of the 10th Amendment. Your thoughts? 90 seconds.
You know, the greater challenge to our freedom is what happens if 5 members of the United States Supreme Court rule that Arizona can't enforce its new law. Do we just throw our hands up? Jefferson and Lincoln both warned us that if we ever got to the point where we handed 5 members of the United States Supreme Court the ultimate and unassailable authority to say this is and is not constitutional, that we will have lost a free country. There are many universal guarantees in the Constitution. First of all, speech, our right of religion, our gun rights, every state to have a republican form of government. Those are universal guarantees. I know at least one other thing that ought to be a universal guarantee and isn't. The very first right, which the Declaration of Independence says we are endowed with by our Creator, life. I don't think New York should be able to allow the termination of the lives of prenatal children. I don't think that's a states' rights issue. But beyond those constitutional universal guarantees, we should support the 10th Amendment and the right of states and local governments to make decisions about things that affect us here closest to home. Now, in rereading the Federalist Papers, I think that the key to actually having the 10th Amendment mean something again is to repeal the 17th Amendment so that senators appointed by the state legislatures would never dare encroach on the rights of states' governments. Repeal the 17th and the 10th might mean something again.
Thank you, Gary Glenn. Finally, Randy Hekman, same question, 90 seconds.
I think the last suggestion is an excellent one. I've been asked that on the campaign trail about the 17th Amendment. I think there's such great wisdom that our framers had to say that the senators should be appointed by the state legislature to keep them connected to the state. And as a result of that not happening, increasingly our senators being there for 6 years can get separated from the real needs of the state and the powers that should remain local. Decisions need to be made local rather than from the federal government. This is particularly true for the welfare system. Do you realize that all the wars that we have fought from the Revolutionary War to present have cost taxpayers $6.4 trillion? The war on poverty, begun by LBJ in 1964, has cost in excess of $16 trillion. About equal to our debt. We have so many people in this country who are just taking, and that's not loving to them. It's wrecked families. In fact, Ronald Reagan said in 1988, he said a number of years ago, federal government declared war on poverty and poverty won. He went on to say not only is it expensive, now it's about $1 trillion a year, but it has wreaked havoc on the safety net that the poor need the most, which is the family unit itself. 4 out of 10 children born in America are born to women not married. In Detroit, 8 out of 10. That's a crime. We need to turn that around. That needs to get out of Washington, come back to the local areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy Hekman. Next, Ron Everett has the next round of questions. We'll start with Scotty Boman.
Thank you. And it deals with foreign policy. What do you see as the role of the United Nations? Should we continue to fund it? And you have 90 seconds.
That's great. I get all that extra time after I say no. I let that go when I did the voter citizenship thing. No, we should not continue to fund it. And now I get to talk about other foreign policy things, I suppose, too. One thing that came up, and I had some questionnaires about this, was something called Agenda 21. This notion that somehow, and we have like these transnational groups that we have local governments meet with and try to dictate the internal policies of communities. This is very dangerous. For obvious reasons, they're bypassing our national government thing, and they can go right to the local. And you get all these people that are leaning toward, big government policies at the local level, which, you get these political machines locally that love this kind of thing. And they start using, these buzzwords like sustainable development, and they keep pumping that into people's heads. They keep thinking that somehow we need to have central planning at a global level. Central planning is a failure. It's a failure at the national level. It works not quite as bad, but poorly still at the state level. Not even all that great at the local level. I come from Detroit. Definitely a horrible idea at the global level.
Thank you, Scotty Boman.
Thank you very much. Up next, Durant, same question, 90 seconds.
Yeah. I don't think we need to be funding the UN as it's currently constituted. But I do say, as I said earlier in response to another question, we have to recognize the unique role of America in the world. And we have to be the place that convenes people to talk about the challenges that face a very dangerous world. We do not want to become isolationists. All of you can, or most of you I'm sure, remember Jean Kilpatrick when she spoke in the United Nations to challenge so many of these totalitarian regimes, and that there was no moral equivalence between them and us. And we have to have the forum that gives the resonance of our ideas. Remember, the Declaration of Independence said all men and women are created equal. All are endowed by their Creator. We are the singular voice for that idea in the world. And if we need to be able to convene people, we cannot ignore a very dangerous world. If we pull back from that, if we pull back from that dangerous world, trust me, that world will overrun us. And we have to be the voice of freedom.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. Next, Gary Glenn.
Well, I put a website up about 4 months ago, garyglenn.us, and you'll find it there today as it was when I first put it up. My call for us, not only as a matter of national sovereignty and liberty, but in order to save the taxpayers the money I think that we waste on it, that we should withdraw from the United Nations. And so I say get out of the United Nations, and some people tell me, yeah, we ought to get the United Nations out of the United States. Send them to The Hague, as far as I'm concerned. I find it offensive as an American that we provide a forum subsidized by our tax dollars for Ahmadinejad or Hugo Chavez to come on our soil and condemn the United States of America and our system of liberty while advancing and promoting socialism in their countries. In addition to that, the Agenda 21 agenda, the imposition on countries around the world, social engineering like changing the definition of marriage and threatening to sanction them if they don't, a body that sets up a human rights commission chaired by Libya, and then purports to lecture the United States and other free nations on what is and is not moral conduct, submitting ourselves to international law. I mean, we ought to just get out of it.
Yes.
And we should never have somebody who wears the uniform of a United States Marine or soldier or Air Forceman or Navy personnel answering to somebody under the United Nations control.
Thank you very much. Randy Hekman, same question.
There is a lot about the United Nations not to like. Gary mentioned some of those. The tendency to give up our sovereignty to the United Nations in that area. For example, our military being somehow put under the authority of some United Nation. I'm totally opposed to giving up our sovereignty. As far as treaties they may have that might control our ability to bear arms in this country. Totally opposed to any of that. But I do believe in truth. I believe that America is formed and fashioned on a foundation of absolute truth. And maybe it's the evangelist in me. But I like to interact with people from other countries, and I like to communicate that truth. I want them to enjoy what we have. I don't want to hoard it. Now, maybe the United Nations isn't the best way to do that. And maybe I'm idealistic in this sense, but I feel there ought to be some platform where people from other nations can come together and talk, and we can share, not with a degree of pride, well, appropriate pride, but not excessive, not arrogance, but pride in what we have. What God has given us in this country is an incredible gift, and I really do want to share that with others. So I'm conflicted in this area, I'm going to be honest with you. I like the idea of getting together when there are conflicts, we can talk about them rather than just start throwing bombs at each other. But if it's fraught with danger, but there's part of me that loves to communicate what we've done here. I love what we've done here in this country. I want to share it. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I would like to inject a...
Randy gets it, the moderators do get a chance to do a follow-up, and then we will be going to Chuck Marino. And we've lost the lights, but hopefully, there we go.
Okay,
No, he gets the moderators do have a chance to do a follow-up, and so.
I just would like to do a follow-up question on this particular question about the role of the UN and should we continue to fund it. I would like you to answer how, if you do not want us to continue to fund it, how would you go about getting rid of the United Nations?
Who are you asking?
That's to Randy Hekman.
That's to
30
Randy
seconds.
Hekman.
Really didn't say to get rid of it. I said, I don't think my mic's on, by the way. It is? All right, now it's on. I said that I want to keep it there in some form, not to allow our sovereignty to be ripped away. I will not allow that. If it comes to that point, get rid of it. But I like to have a forum in which people from other nations can come and see the great thing that we have in this country. I love what we have here. Again, it's on life support in many ways. But the fundamental ideas of our country are awesome. And I want to share them. I want to get us healthy and then share that with the rest of the world. So I'm still for being able to communicate with others, but not lose our sovereignty.
Just to explain the rules in that section, the moderators do have an opportunity to do a follow-up if they feel like something needs to be clarified, and then the person we're asking the follow-up to gets a 30-second response. Chuck Marino?
Let's work through this together. First of all, the United Nations is made up of a group of people that pretty much it's a top-down society. We're in the United States, it's a bottom-up society. Second of all, we've got Agenda 21. There's been a number of people that explained Agenda 21. Lately, the United Nations has asked for complete autonomy over the internet. And we've got European countries that says water does not hydrate, so that you don't use bottled water. So where are we going? Where's the United Nations going? We can point to a lot of things in the United Nations, and every one of them speaks to the issue that they're not in our league. They don't care about the way we govern. In fact, they just as soon change our government. We've got a lot of things around the United States. I don't know how many people in this room understand that North Korea at one time was making so many bogus bills, $10 bills, that the United States decided to redesign it. The United Nations never stepped in and said counterfeiting was wrong. They weren't the only nation that was making counterfeit money. Consistently, the United Nations votes against the United States. I do agree we should replace it, but everything in my bones and fibers says we should replace it with something that mirrors our ideals, not Europe's ideals.
Very good. But I would still like an answer to the question by any of you. If you would like to get rid of the United Nations, because this has been proposed before, how could we go about doing that? Scott?
Okay, Woodrow Wilson actually tried to form an organization like the United Nations, called the League of Nations. And it did get formed, and it failed. It failed because the United States did not participate in it. I submit that our withdrawal from the UN would condemn it to irrelevancy. Now, as far as the idea of a free society of free nations, we really have such a thing. It's called the United States of America. But the United States of America does not need to be restricted to America. We have accepted statehood of Hawaii, for instance. Okay.
Thank you very much.
May I answer?
Clark Durant also would like to jump in, where as many people would like him.
Is my mic on? I think the way it could be funded and should be done, it doesn't have to be funded with government money. There are all sorts of foundations, individuals, and companies that would be willing to underwrite the ability of this kind of broader conversation to take place. A way that could bring perhaps a healing and reconciliation in the world. There are all sorts of ways in which people can gather. I chose the city of Philadelphia because it is the city of brotherly love. And the United States can be a place that says, let us call everyone together and do it without government money and without government power, where we'd lose our sovereignty, but to engage the world in the ideas we believe in.
Thank you very much. Gary Glenn?
Well, the first step is to stop giving them American taxpayers dollars. That's simple enough. cut off the funding from the United States government, which we spend hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I don't know who owns the property at United Nations Plaza 1 in New York City, but if it's owned by Americans, we should evict them and invite them to meet at The Hague or in Belgium or somewhere else. But the first step is simple. Cut off the money supply and see where they end up.
And Randy Hekman, since we went around the room, would you like to take that down, the follow-up?
Yeah, just that, again, there are different ways to look. What we're all bummed about, and rightly so, is the United Nations, is the effort of our government to give our sovereignty away to some world government. We have a good thing here. We are proud of this thing. We are exceptional as a nation. And again, the best way to accomplish it, I'm not sure we've come across that yet, but we've got to find a way to maximize all of the above. To be able to communicate with nations appropriately, not on our nickel, and to share what we need to share about who we are.
Chuck Marino, did you throw a red flag?
No, I just wanted to.
He gets
Answer too.
Fair enough.
Thanks. I'm always glad when I agree with Gary. I think the only thing I would piggyback onto Gary is to say that all we have to do is let them buy the building and let them pay the taxes in New York, and they'll be done.
Very good, thank you.
Let's move on to our next question, although I'd still love to talk about this for quite a while longer. Gentlemen, we'll start, the Clark Durant will get the first question, the first go-around on this one. Is the Federal Reserve unconstitutional? Would you support an audit, an abolishment? And if it's no to that, what would be your option? There's a scenario, you get 90 seconds. Clark Durant.
I think clearly there should be a full audit. I think what we have set up with the Federal Reserve is a perpetual debt machine. And that machine needs to stop because it's bankrupting our people. I think the other piece is anytime you give anyone a monopoly over something, and we have given the Federal Reserve the monopoly over our money, that when you give a monopoly, you get less. You get less quality, you get less integrity, and you get less accountability. So I think that the way in which money should be done, it shouldn't be something that is just printed on a piece of paper that's a note. We need money that is backed by the soundness of gold or silver so that we can hold these politicians accountable. And I think that the Federal Reserve needs to be replaced.
I remember the question. I remember the question.
Very
And
well,
the
Gary
answer,
Glenn, 90 seconds.
the answer to the question is yes. The role it plays is unconstitutional. The Constitution of the United States says that Congress shall value our currency. It doesn't say some quasi-private agency. The Federal Reserve Bank is not federal, has no reserves, and it's not a bank. It is this shadow government in terms of our financing that unconstitutionally values the value of the dollar on the international markets, and in so doing is able to dictate the prosperity or despondency not only of citizens of this country, but citizens around the world as our financial markets interact. So I believe, should we audit the Fed? Well, of course, that's a given. But I think they should be removed from any role they play whatsoever in the valuation of our currency. If that amounts to doing away with the Federal Reserve Bank, they're a private organization, so they have a right to exist. But in terms of any role they want to play in our federal government, they should be abolished. Now, let's see if I can pass the Rick Perry test. I said the Federal Reserve should go. Let me add to that the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Education, the NLRB, and my favorite one, the most hated and feared agency of the federal government, the Internal Revenue Service, which could only be closed with a fair tax. Fairtax.com.
Next, go to Randy Hekman. Your thoughts on the Federal Reserve? 90 seconds.
Yeah, our framers were just so wise. They understand human nature. They understand our tendency that once we get power, we hold on to it and we grow. And so that's why we have separation of power. They understand human nature. The Federal Reserve has way too much power, and I think it is unconstitutional. I mean, I'm looking at Article 1, Section 8, is that the Congress has the authority to coin money, regulate the value thereof in foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. In Article 1, Section 9, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. That doesn't happen. The Federal Reserve is a rogue agency. It's not under control. It definitely needs to be audited. In my opinion, it needs to be eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy Hekman. Chuck Marino, same question on the Federal Reserve, 90 seconds.
I can't judge everybody's heart up here, but I know this much. The reason you have a group of people up here is because we have a Senate that's given up their rights to some of the things that the Constitution absolutely told them it was their responsibility for. You can look at each one of the things that these gentlemen have pointed out. Federal Reserve is just one of those things that the Senate and the Congress have absolutely turned a blind eye to and let somebody else assume the responsibility. We had earlier this year where 12 people were going to make a decision on how our economy was going to run. We've had time after time after time where the Senate has decided to give the power that they have over to somebody else, including advise and consent. I think that we need to, for the first time in the history, as a people, to take the responsibility of what our forefathers told us, and that is government by the people, and the people need to stand up and elect senators who are willing to stand up and do their job.
Short
Last for this round, Scotty Boman.
Short answer is yes, unconstitutional. A lot of people don't understand why the Federal Reserve is such a bad deal, in addition to it being unconstitutional. One is by printing money without a standard, it is possible to sink our country into great debt by the Congress being able to borrow money that isn't available, by the Federal Reserve loaning money out due to Fed secrecy and the lack of an audit to foreign governments. It has the notion of too big to fail, which allows the Fed to bail out large banks, but small banks lose. So the large banks take ridiculous risks and then fail and then get bailed out. The small banks die, thus creating a greater consolidation of the banking system. And most importantly, for the average person, your savings become worthless because of inflation. Inflation is gradual but steady. And over time, what happens if you try to save money to get ahead, it used to be you could collect interest on your savings and have something to retire with. Now if you save money, you're losing money. And so what happens now is it's making us even more dependent on the government, making those who can't see what's happening think that the government is their savior, that capitalism has failed when it's the other way around.
Thank you, Scotty Boman. Ron Edwards will have the next question. We'll be starting with Gary Glenn.
And Gary, what is your plan to revive and restore the American economy? You have 90 seconds.
Well, I mentioned some things that I would propose earlier, and let me do so again. As a county commissioner 16 years ago, I authored the nation's first medical savings account health care plan for county employees anywhere in America. I was asked to testify before Congress. It was called a national pioneer in free market health care reform. So the first thing I would want to do is repeal this mountain of regulations that prevent small business and entrepreneurs from creating jobs and replace it with a free market-based health care reform. We got to repeal Obamacare. As I said earlier, I think we need a national right-to-work law. It's not just a matter of individual freedom to choose. It's one of the key factors which American companies and foreign companies use to decide whether or not they'll locate a plant and new jobs in a particular location. And I'd like to see all 50 states eligible for those new plant sites and new job creation. I think we ought to aggressively harvest our own oil and gas resources. We've got an estimated 1 trillion barrels of oil. We ought to tell Iran they can go pound their ample supply of sand. We don't need their oil. When we've got more than the other 10 top oil-producing countries in the world combined. And Penn State says if we just do that, we'd create 800,000 new American oil and gas jobs. Now, our corporate income tax is more than double the international average, and we've got 1.2 trillion in foreign bank accounts American companies have made over there. They won't bring back on shore to create jobs. We've got to become more competitive in terms of our tax structure if we want to create American jobs with that money.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glenn. Randy Hekman, same question.
Thank you. If we wanted to find a way to kill an economy, we couldn't do much better than what we're currently doing in our country. It's tragic. We've got to take the lid off to allow people, the free people. Government's supposed to be on the sidelines and allow free people to create wealth. Instead, we've not done that. And again, regulations would be the top of the thing that's holding things down. We need to end and sunset all regulations after 10 years. We need to approve the bill that's in Congress right now that says that any regulation that's going to impact our economy more than $100 million has to get approved by Congress and signed by the President. Our tax system, as Gary indicated, needs to come down for corporations. It's the highest in the world. Energy, I agree. I'm a graduate of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I'm not afraid of technical things. 3 of the last 14 years I've spent researching. I actually had a white smock, believe it or not. Test tubes. I had only one small explosion. It was not nuclear, but it was an explosion. But I was experimenting and researching and doing consulting in an area called low energy nuclear reactions, LENR. Don't have time to get into that. Check out my website and see what we're talking about. We need these things. But trust me, the big house that's on fire is our debt that grows by $76,000 a second. We need to cut costs, and the primary area, I've already mentioned it, is the welfare state that is choking and killing us and hurting the people that we love and claim we want to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hekman. Chuck Marino, what say you?
The things that are plaguing this country are like a three-legged stool. If you don't fix all 3 of them simultaneously, it's going to collapse. First of all, the debt. Our debt is unsustainable. We have to do something about it. And taxing or income is not the problem. It's spending. We're spending way too much money. The federal government's into things that they have no right to be in. Second is regulations. Our regulations all need to be sunset. And we have to take all departments back to a zero balance at the beginning of every year, and they have to justify the budgets for that year. We should use something like an ISO 9000, what business use, to monitor them, and to also make sure that those departments, if there's fraud or waste inside those departments, the people's heads roll because of it. Next, taxes. Our taxes are way too high. Our foreign taxes, I ran two international companies, and I've got to tell you, our international corporations around the world love the fact that we have taxes where the taxes are at 35%, 36%. I would lower them below 24%. I would also make sure all the taxes that are overseas and money that is made overseas can come back to the United States without being taxed. And that money could go for building new plants, job creation, or new equipment.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Scotty Boman, same question.
Red flag.
Oh, red flag. Who-
Chuck Marino.
Chuck, you threw the red flag, another 30 seconds.
Thank you. The other thing we have to do is jobs. With jobs. We have to create jobs. We have to look at what's going wrong. And the very simple answer is do everything opposite what this administration is doing. We'll build jobs. But you're not interested in that kind of answer. So I'll give you a number of them. First of all, it's just as cheap to build a second pipeline as it is to build one pipeline. We're going to take oil from Canada. I love my brothers and sisters to the north, but that doesn't do our country a whole lot of good except create jobs, and I want those. But the second thing is build a second one to get the oil from North Dakota and Oklahoma and send it down.
Thank you very much. And Scotty Boman, what is your plan to revive the U.S. economy?
Okay, I have a 5-point plan. Get out of the way. The government is the problem here. A free economy will prosper if given a chance.
Now we have these impediments to a free economy that we need to deal with. One of them, yes, is spending. And that's why earlier, it's not that I think the fair tax is necessarily any worse than the income tax, and it might be better if it were revenue neutral or went down, and maybe it could be. But my point in answering the way I did earlier was because the problem isn't that we don't have enough tax money, it's that we have too much spending, and I submit that we would not need the money we get from the income tax if we stuck with our old Code 1, Section 8, and the federal government only did what it was supposed to do. Now, how do we cut all that money? Yes, welfare spending is part of it. The left has a constituency that loves welfare spending. We also have another thing that Eisenhower warned us about. And that is another thing the federal government loves to spend on is the military-industrial complex. Yes, we need a strong defense. It's a prime function of government. We don't need to subsidize, as an international welfare system, everyone else's defense, including our foreign competitors. Okay? If the left we could get the left to give up its constituency of welfare, maybe we can also get our friends on the right to give up their constituency of warfare. And you cut out welfare and warfare, and we could really save some money.
No red flags?
90 seconds. 90 seconds.
Yes, 90 seconds, same question.
Economic growth will come about if we have less spending, less taxes, less government, and more freedom. Now, what does that mean in a practical way? It means, there's not a person in this room, by the way, if you had money overseas and you knew you had to pay 35% to bring it back here, you wouldn't bring it back either. Our manufacturing community suffers because we penalize capital. We penalize people who invest and save. So we should eliminate the death tax. We should reduce the capital gains tax, reduce the corporate tax, simplify the income tax. But this whole effort of energy independence, we can create more jobs, more revenues for our local schools and other things if we just develop all the resources from clean coal, oil, natural gas. We will not only have lower prices, we'll defund our enemies. And we will be creating more American jobs with more American companies if we totally allow ourselves to develop what we already have. Then lastly, we need integrity with our currency. And in order to get integrity with our currency, we need to have an honest conversation about honest money. Then lastly, the three biggest items in the federal budget are Social Security, Medicare, and the interest on the debt. If we don't reform our entitlements and have an honest national conversation about how to do that, we will not get out of debt. The GAO just released a report just before the end of December that the unfunded liabilities of the federal government exceed the value of the equity in every home and all companies traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We are in trouble if we don't cut spending and taxes and government.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That was Clark Durant, and believe it or not, we're several minutes after 3 o'clock, so we're at the point where we are going to be offering closing statements for everyone. Everyone will be receiving a 2-minute closing statement, and we start off with the next person who is lined for questions, Randy Hekman, 2 minutes closing statement.
No, I'm throwing both.
Before we do closing statements, Mr. Hekman will receive 2 30-second increments as he throws both red flags.
Well, I want to add those to my closing statement.
Want to do that at 3 minutes? You're welcome to do so.
I appreciate it. Well, this has been good. I appreciate the attentiveness that you guys have given to what's gone on up here for the last 2 hours. It's really been rewarding as a speaker, and I want to thank you for that. I know that you all represent Tea Parties from around the state, that you care about this country as we all do. Well, we got to tell you, who we are. We've been doing that, what our positions are. I said at the beginning, we need more than someone that goes to Washington and votes the right way. Don't expect, we got some good guys up here, but don't expect any one of us to go to Washington and wave a magic wand over the Capitol as one of 100 senators and everything's just hunky-dory, it's going to be cured. Because government is a lagging indicator of where the culture is. Is American culture healthy today? Well, neither is its government, and it reflects that. And change there is not just the cause of government. There's heart change that needs to take place. Government's not in the heart-changing business. It's part of the reason why I keep talking about this welfare. Welfare often, similar to crime, frankly, is a heart change. We see Chuck Colson helping in the crime side. We need the Chuck Colsons in the welfare side as well. to change hearts, to get people shareholders in this country. America only works when Americans are working together. And we're not. There's half of us that are kind of throwing fish at the other half. So we need to make changes in Washington. We've been talking the last 2 hours about changes largely in Washington. But trust me, we are like 1776. We are like 1941. We're like 1861. We're like 2001. We have needs in our country that are huge, too huge for us humans to do. And there's a danger of tea parties and right-wing people that we are, of replacing the arrogance on the left with the arrogance on the right. We can figure this thing out because we're so smart and we're so right. Our founders started with an incredible sense of humility. I love what it says in the Jefferson Memorial. It says, God who gave us life, gave us liberty. And he said, how can we continue to have liberty if we forget that fact, that our liberties came from God? We need to turn back to God as a nation. He's been the best friend that we've had. We need to make changes in Washington. There's major changes or we're going over the cliff. But they're not going to be made or they're not going to stick unless the public has change of heart and says, we agree, we need to do that. We're shareholders, let's make this thing happen. Let me summarize it with our Pledge of Allegiance. One nation, under God, not next to God, not above God, not ignoring God, under God, indivisible. The result? Liberty and justice for every one of us. That's what we need. That's what we've had. Let's do it again, together with courage.
We'll go to Chuck Marino now. Chuck, 2-minute closing remarks.
Our framers put into our Constitution that our liberties and our freedom comes from God. We have to remember that. It's important why they put it that way, that no man can take your freedoms away. And if they do take your freedoms away, you have to stand up and fight. Ronald Reagan says that freedom is not inherited. It's not something that's in your bloodline. It's something you have to fight for. First of all, I talked about my background and the fact that I knew how to read technical papers, and I knew the difference between junk science, theoretical science, and also proven science. I also know the difference between when a country is being competitive and a country is ripping us off. China's been ripping us off for the last 1.5 or 2 years. I can tell you all kinds of reasons why China's ripping us off, but the biggest thing that they've done to us is taken over our economy. As we look in the future, we have to decide if we want to be a socialist country or we want to be an independence country. We're at the threshold of deciding which way to go. But the only way we can make sure that we make a change is stand up for a change. No longer can the silent majority be the silent majority. You have to decide whether you're going to reach to your friends, to your neighbors, and make sure you get them interested in the same thing you're interested in. You got to make sure that they understand our Constitution. You got to make sure they understand that they're losing their freedoms. If you don't do that, I guarantee you, our country will be a socialist country.
Thank you, Chuck Marino. Next closing statement, Scotty. Boman throws it, so he will be receiving 2 minutes and 30 seconds closing statement.
Hi, briefly, I just wanted to kind of, in the way of rebuttal, national right to work. Again, there's a good way and a wrong way to accomplish the same end. We just need to repeal the Wagner Act and other laws that followed that tried to force labor contracts on people from the federal level. If we remove that, then we don't need to pile other laws on top. Also, we have the Federal Reserve issue. Some people were talking about what we replace that with. Well, the federal government can set a gold value to the dollar, but beyond that, people can trade in a medium of exchange of their own choosing. And people can freely choose coinage that is of a certain metal value, and the federal government's role can be enforcing fraud instead of stealing the money from people as they did with Liberty dollars. Finally, I believe it is should be up to churches and not the government to tell us what marriage is, and it may depend, and there may be some subtle differences from one religion to the next. The First Amendment restricts freedom of religion, and I'm not for repealing it. Promotes freedom of religion, and I'm not for repealing that. Most politicians have been speaking to our inner tyrant and getting you to neglect the liberties of your neighbor in exchange for protecting the liberties you value. The problem is that your neighbor has been playing the same game. If you hear a voice in your head saying there ought to be a law, stop and ask yourself if that law would respect the right of others to live for their own sakes. You create wealth with your own mind and labor, whatever you get by voluntary, honest exchange is an extension of your life. If a law takes your property, it violates your past. If it denies your peaceful choices, it violates your present. And if it causes your death, it violates your future. Current laws pillage our past, present, and future. I wish to change that. I'm Scotty Boman. Find out more about me at Boman12.org. It's BOMAN 12.org. I have nominating petitions out there. By the way, you need to make sure it's your county on the top when you sign below. And I also take contributions and volunteers online at my website, Boman12.org. Thank you very much for your time.
Next is Clark Durant.
I got two of them.
You're going to throw, so that gives Clark Durant 3
I
minutes.
established that precedent the last time. First of all, thank you all for coming. This is really a momentous time in our country. And I want to say how grateful I am that all of you have risen to the occasion. Our country is at risk. You know, my daddy was a captain in World War II. He was one of the first Americans on the island of Japan after Hiroshima. I was a captain in the United States Army, and I love my country, as all of us do. But our country is at risk because we have forgotten about the value of freedom, and that freedom really counts, and we have to live it in our daily life and work. 20 years ago, when I came back from Washington, instead of becoming a lobbyist, I came back to Washington to do the things of my heart, and started a school system in the city of Detroit. Took 165 children in a city that most people had written off. And with a wonderful team of people over these last 20 years, we have created the finest schools in any urban area in the country. And we did it the American way, not with government money, but with the love of ordinary men and women who came to come around these children to give them the taste of freedom and what their lives could be like. That model could be all across our country if we get government off our backs and allow people to be free in our constitutional republic. Now let me say one other thing. That empty podium down there is over in Grand Rapids, the man behind that empty podium. We have a very difficult race in front of us. Debbie Stabenow is a formidable campaigner. I am very grateful as I look out in this audience. Some of you have been those who have contributed more than $1.3 million to my campaign. And I say publicly, thank you. Because this race, first, in order to beat Pete Hoekstra, is going to be formidable. He has already over $2 million. We have a fundamental choice here and a fundamental opportunity. When Larry Arnn cut a video for me the other day and endorsed my campaign as the senator, as the person best equipped to be a United States Senator to restore our constitutional framework, I was deeply grateful. Not because it was a person who's the president of Hillsdale College, who is one of the recognized constitutional scholars in our country, but because here is a man who normally doesn't get into the arena, but recognizes that if we don't have this conversation of freedom across our country and across our state, no longer will we have the freedoms we have. So thank you all for being here. I ask for your vote. I ask for your vote not to just be a vote, but to be the beginning of a movement that will restore freedom in our country. I want the second shot heard around the world to come from Michigan. I want Michigan to be the example as we go from California to Maine, Florida to Washington and Oregon, telling the Michigan story. That we upset the establishment of the Republican Party. We chose a freedom-loving person who will be a freedom-loving advocate for Michigan and frankly for the country in these coming days. Anyway, thank you very much. God bless you all as we go forth from this night, or this day.
Gary Glenn will receive the last closing statement. I'm going to ask the audience to remain seated when Gary Glenn finishes for just a moment. There's a couple of things we need to let you know here in the audience at CMU before you walk out the door to be aware of as far as emptying, and also to our listening audience. Just a couple of quick things. Gary Glenn, your closing statement, 2 minutes.
Okay, appreciate it. Folks, our country is on the brink of being turned into the United Socialist States of America. And I feel a sense of duty to stop it. I don't wear either uniform anymore, but as an Eagle Scout, I swore an oath on my honor to do my best, to do my duty to God and my country. And 20 years later, in the Persian Gulf War buildup, I took another oath. Some of you probably did too. To protect and uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I think the threats to our liberty today come from sources domestic, more than from any power outside the borders of this country. I have led without flinching and without backing up on tough issues like right to work or protecting the definition of marriage and traditional family values, or on free market health care reform like medical savings accounts. I've got a track record of effective leadership on those types of issues. I also want to close with this. I'm not here today as an outsider asking for your support. In April of 2009, on the courthouse steps in Midland, I was one of the speakers at the first Tea Party rally held in that county. A year later, in 2010, and it'll appear in Tea Party rallies all across this state. I'm not just asking for your support for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. I'm here to respectfully submit my application for membership in the Tea Party caucus of the United States Senate. You know, if we will simply restore the founding principles of liberty and moral and economic that made our country not only an economic powerhouse but a force for moral good around the world, I am confident we can turn the light of liberty back on in this shining city on a hill and make Michigan and America as great as they've ever been. Now, surely it is my prayer that God will bless America, but I think it's our duty to once again be worthy of those blessings. So I'd say God heal, protect, and preserve America long enough to give us one last chance to leave for our children what we inherited from our parents, a free country. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, before you leave the podium, a couple of quick announcements. Number one, the candidates, several of them in this race, have filled out questionnaires. There is obviously questions we weren't able to get to today, but there is a lot more information that will be available shortly at Michigan #4, conservativesenate.com. That's Michigan with the numeral 4, conservativesenate.com. Further questions will be posted online there so you can get to know the candidates better. Ron Edwards, quickly give your website so people can learn more about your broadcast work.
Well, you can catch me at theronedwards.com, and the Edwards Notebook Commentary is syndicated at several stations around the country, including here in Michigan, WDTK, AM 1400, and it is a streaming station.
And also, thanks, we're the Patriot Voice Radio Network that brought you the online streaming of this event. We want to thank the Michigan Tea Party Patriots, the campus conservatives here at CMU, of course, Michigan Board Conservative Senate, who's putting on this as well. Pat Battaglia is our timer today and has kept us in line. We're so grateful for that as well. And also, wanted to let you know that the event here at CMU itself is not over. There's going to be a meet and greet in a few minutes. We're all going to start moseying on over to the Baber Room. Now that is the room when you leave the exit, you can hang a right and you'll see the glass door area. That'll take you over to the Baber Room. There's going to be a meet and greet, get to mingle and chat with the candidates on an individual basis as well. So we very much appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thank you, audience, both online and here at CMU, for your concern for our country. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. Thank you so much and have a great day. Thank you, candidates.